They said I was nothing. That sentence burned into my chest as I sat at the dinner table, surrounded by the people who were supposed to love me the most. The clinking of silverware against plates felt louder than my own heartbeat, and the laughter in the room wasn't warm. It was sharp, cutting, directed at me. I had walked into that house with the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. But no, tonight would prove again that in their eyes, I was never enough. My name is Captain Kate Alphen, and for as long as I can remember, my family has treated my life in uniform as if it were some childish fantasy. The night had started simply. My father had insisted we all gather together, the entire family, including my sister and her fiancé, at the long oak table where memories of my childhood dinners still lingered. The house smelled like roasted chicken and wine. Candles flickered, casting shadows against the walls. But as always, I wasn't there to be included. I was there to be measured and found lacking. "Kate," my mother said, with a smile that never reached her eyes, "how long are you planning to keep playing soldier? One day you'll have to grow up and find a real career." Her words dripped with the same condescension I'd heard my whole life. The table chuckled politely and I clenched my jaw. A real career. I thought about the blood, the sweat, the nights I spent awake guarding men and women who depended on me, but none of that mattered here. My sister, golden and perfect, leaned forward, her diamond earrings sparkling under the light. "Don't be so hard on her, Mom," she said, smirking. "At least she's trying. Not everyone can have a stable job or a family to make proud." The jab landed, clean and precise, just like she wanted. Everyone laughed. My father raised his glass, adding salt to the wound. "To our pride and joy," he said, looking at my sister, not me, "the one who carries our family's name with dignity." The glasses clinked, but mine stayed still on the table. I could feel the humiliation spreading through my body, a hot flush in my cheeks. Every word they spoke chipped away at me, dragging me back through years of the same routine. Years of them ignoring the fact that while they sipped wine at home, I was halfway across the world in the dirt, carrying soldiers on my back, barking commands to keep my unit alive. My medals, stuffed in a drawer at my apartment, meant nothing to them. My sacrifices invisible. It wasn't just tonight. It was every Christmas I spent alone because leave wasn't approved. Every birthday I missed because duty called. Every scar, physical and emotional, that came with wearing this uniform. And here I was, being told it was all pointless, that I was pointless. "Kate," my father said, turning to me with a smirk, "don't look so upset. You know we're only joking. Lighten up." But it wasn't a joke. It never was. Something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. I straightened my back, my fork clattering softly against the plate as I let it go. My voice was calm, steady, but it carried weight. "My name," I said, my eyes sweeping across the table that had become my battlefield, "is Captain Kate Alphen." For the first time that evening, silence fell. Their laughter died mid-breath. And in that moment, I wasn't their failure daughter anymore. I wasn't nothing. I was me, whole, scarred, and unshakable. Captain Kate Alphen. The silence at that dinner table sent me spiraling back to where it all began. They saw me as nothing more than a little girl playing dress-up in fatigues, but they had no idea what it took to become Captain Kate Alphen. They had never walked with me through the gates of the military academy, where dreams turned into grueling discipline and where weakness was stripped away until only steel remained. The first day at the academy, I still remember the sound of boots hitting the pavement in unison, the bark of orders echoing off the walls, and the sting of exhaustion after endless drills. I had bruises on my arms, blisters on my feet, and doubts that clawed at my chest every night. But giving up was never an option. I endured every sleepless hour, every shouted correction, because deep inside I knew I was meant to lead. Leadership wasn't glamorous. It wasn't medals pinned to my chest or salutes on parade days. It was standing in the mud with my team when the rain turned everything to sludge. It was learning how to carry someone twice my weight when their legs gave out. It was holding my breath as explosions thundered in the distance, pretending I wasn't afraid because my soldiers needed strength even when I had none left to give. In the field, respect was never handed. It was earned. Every time I barked an order and they followed, every time I shielded them from danger, every time I walked last in line to make sure no one was left behind, that's where my worth was forged. My name carried weight there, not because of my family's approval, but because men and women trusted me with their lives. And yet, back home, none of that mattered. My parents never once asked me what it felt like to command a unit. They never asked about the weight of responsibility or the faces of the soldiers I couldn't save. They didn't even know their daughter had been decorated for bravery after pulling 3 men from a burning vehicle under fire. That medal sits untouched in a box, gathering dust, because here in this house it is invisible. I think that's the hardest part. The betrayal doesn't come from strangers on the street. It comes from the people who are supposed to be your safe place. When your own family looks at you and sees nothing but failure, when they laugh at sacrifices they'll never understand. That kind of wound cuts deeper than any battlefield injury. I carried brothers and sisters through fire. I patched up wounds with trembling hands while praying the helicopters would arrive in time. I stood in silence at too many flag-draped coffins, saluting friends I would never speak to again. That was my reality. And my family? They never saw a second of it. They never cared to. But that pain, that rejection, it no longer crushed me the way it once did. In its place, something else had grown: determination. If my own blood refused to see my worth, then I would no longer beg them to. Respect was already mine. I had earned it, far from this table, where their voices could not touch me. And as I sat there that night, the sting of their words still fresh, I realized I didn't need their recognition anymore. I was Captain Kate Alphen, with or without their approval. The mocking didn't stop after I reminded them who I was. If anything, it grew sharper, like they were determined to break me down further. My father's friends, older men in polished suits who had joined us for the evening, leaned back in their chairs, smirking like they had the right to weigh in on my life. One of them, swirling wine in his glass, chuckled and said, "Captain, huh? Sounds impressive, but we all know those ranks don't last. Temporary officer, temporary glory." The others laughed, nodding as if he'd just told a clever joke. Another leaned forward, pointing his fork at me. "It's just a phase. Women rarely last in the military. You'll quit when it gets tough. Then what? You'll come running back here looking for something real." Their words hit like bullets. I gripped the edge of my chair to keep my composure. A part of me wanted to stand, slam my hands against the table, and lay out every sacrifice I had made, every life I had touched, every soldier who had trusted me. But I didn't. I stayed quiet, my silence heavier than their laughter. Because deep down, I knew it wasn't worth wasting my breath. Still, the sting was unbearable. My father smirked, clearly enjoying the performance. My mother giggled politely as though mocking me had become a dinner ritual. My sister whispered something to her fiancé, and they both laughed behind their hands. For a moment, I felt like the walls were closing in, like the air was being sucked from the room. And then, everything changed. My phone buzzed on the table. The sound was small but sharp, cutting through the laughter like a blade. I glanced at the screen and froze. The name flashing there wasn't one I could ignore. My father's boss. A man who oversaw major defense contracts, someone whose calls didn't come lightly. The room quieted as curiosity spread. My father frowned, suddenly alert. He cleared his throat. "You can ignore that," he muttered, trying to wave it off. But I didn't. I slid my finger across the screen and lifted the phone to my ear. "Captain Alphen," came the voice on the other end, firm and respectful. Ma'am, I apologize for disturbing your evening, but I needed to confirm details from your after-action report. Your leadership on the last operation has been noted by several senior officials. Outstanding work, ma'am. The word ma'am rang out, crystal clear. My chest tightened, not from nerves, but from the way the room fell into absolute silence. My father's boss, a man he admired, respected, and even feared, had just spoken to me with a reverence none of them had ever shown. When I replied, my voice was steady, calm. "Of course, sir. I'll provide the details first thing tomorrow morning." He thanked me again. "Thank you, ma'am," before hanging up. I set the phone down gently. The silence around the table was deafening. My father's hand twitched against his glass, his friends shifted uncomfortably, and my mother's face had lost all color. My sister's smirk was gone, replaced by wide eyes that betrayed something she would never admit: shock. For the first time that night, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the outsider, the failure, the disappointment. At that table, in that house, in front of the very people who had spent years tearing me down, I had been recognized, not by them, but by someone they all looked up to. And in their silence, I finally felt the weight of truth. They had no power over me anymore. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let it stretch, heavy and uncomfortable, pressing down on every single person at that table. Their laughter had died, their smug expressions had slipped away, and now they sat frozen in the aftermath of a truth they couldn't deny. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to gloat. All I had to do was breathe and let reality do the talking for me. My father's boss had given me something no one in that room ever had: recognition, and not just any recognition. He had spoken about a mission that was never supposed to leave classified files, a mission where lives had hung by a thread, and I had been the one to pull that thread back into place. His words carried weight, the kind of weight my family's empty judgments could never touch. "Captain Alphen," he had said, "your leadership saved lives." Those weren't words you could dismiss with a smirk. I folded my hands calmly on the table, my gaze moving from one face to another. My sister tried to force her signature smile, but it faltered, trembling at the edges like a mask she couldn't hold up anymore. My mother looked down at her plate, suddenly fascinated by food she wasn't eating. My father's jaw tightened, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. His friends stared at their glasses, unwilling to meet my eyes, as if by ignoring me they could erase what had just happened. But they couldn't. "You see," I said softly, my voice steady, controlled. "You've spent years mocking me, years laughing at my career, my choices, my sacrifices. But outside this house, in the real world, my name means something. Not because of you, not because of what this family thinks, but because I've earned it. I didn't need to list my medals, didn't need to recount the sleepless nights, the missions, the fear I carried in silence. The call had done that for me. The respect in his voice had done what my words never could. It shattered the illusion they had clung to all these years. The shame on their faces was louder than any argument. My sister dropped her fork, the sound sharp in the quiet room. My mother shifted in her chair, her eyes darting to the door as though she could escape the moment. My father finally looked at me, but for once there was no smirk, no cutting remark. Just silence. It wasn't victory I felt in that moment. It was clarity. They couldn't twist this. They couldn't spin it into another joke or another jab. For once, they had to see me exactly as I was. Not the failure daughter, not the embarrassment they hid behind polite excuses, but Captain Kate Alphen, a woman who had carved her worth into the world without their help. I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in. I simply sat there, calm and unshaken, letting them sit with their shame. Because sometimes the quiet truth is the sharpest weapon of all. I pushed my chair back slowly, the legs scraping against the floor with a sound that cut through the heavy silence. No one moved. No one dared to speak. Their eyes followed me, but for once there were no insults waiting on their tongues, no laughter ready to sting, just silence. The same silence that had mocked me for years was now their prison. I stood tall, smoothing the front of my jacket, letting them see me as I was, not their failure, not their disappointment, but the officer I had become. My medals weren't pinned to my chest that night, but I carried every one of them in the way I held myself, in the weight of my steps, in the calm certainty of who I was. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You'll never understand what it took to get here," I said quietly, almost to myself, though I knew they heard every word. "And that's fine. I don't need you to." My father's lips parted as if he wanted to say something, but the words never came. My mother shifted uncomfortably, her hands folded tight in her lap. My sister stared down at the table, her pride cracked in half. For once, the house that had always drowned me in noise was swallowed by silence, and I realized in that moment this was my revenge, not screaming, not begging, not breaking down for them to see. My revenge was dignity. It was walking away with my head held high while they sat there, finally forced to face the truth of who I was. I turned and left the room, my boots clicking against the floor like a march. Step by step, I felt the weight slide off my shoulders. By the time I reached the door, I wasn't their unwanted daughter anymore. I was Captain Kate Alphen, and outside those walls, the world already knew it. The night air hit me as I stepped out, cool and steady. I closed my eyes and breathed in the silence, not the suffocating silence of their judgment, but the peaceful silence of freedom. Somewhere out there, soldiers I had led still trusted me. Commanders still valued me. My name meant something where it mattered most. Behind me, the house stayed quiet. No footsteps followed, no voices called my name. They would sit there for the rest of the night, replaying the call, replaying my words, replaying the weight of what they had tried so hard to deny. And that was enough. I didn't need their acceptance. I didn't need their pride, because I had already found something stronger. My worth wasn't tied to their approval. It was written in the lives I had touched, the missions I had led, the sacrifices I had endured. I walked away not as their daughter, but as myself, Captain Kate Alphen, respected, saluted, free. And that was the moment I knew I had finally won.